Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another podcast episode. Today, I am very happy to announce a special guest, Jon Uhler. He is a licensed professional counselor with experience working with people in the jail system, pedophiles and predators. And today we are going to be discussing a little bit more of how these people think and what goes on through their mind. Jon, welcome to the show. And if you can, please introduce yourself a little bit more. That'd be great.
David, it's a privilege to be with you. I like the German. We were talking about my last name. In English, we pronounce it Uhler, but in German, it's Uhler. So, a German derivation there. So, it's a pleasure to be with you, David. I'm a therapist by trade, been doing therapy for about 30 years, worked in all sorts of settings. But my background really can be summarized as far as specializations. The populations that I work with would really be three. One would be survivors of sexual abuse, significant sexual abuse, although all sexual abuse is significant. Kids in the system, so what are called multiple placement failures, so those that can no longer be sustained or cared for in foster care, so they end up in group homes and then eventually in residential treatment. So a step up or a step down from psych hospital. We also worked on a psych hospital for adults. And then I spent 11 plus years in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections on psychology staff, where I was recruited. Turned them down a number of times. I didn't want to work in a prison. Was recruited to start the nation's first intensive treatment program in long-term solitary confinement. So where the Hannibal Lecters, the pillagers, the plunderers, the cannibals, just interesting individuals were housed that couldn't play nice in what's called general population. So those were my guys. When a new program is opened up in a prison system, all the other prisons will sort of offload their most problematic inmates. And so I had the worst of the worst inmates. And the goal was to get them out of their cells unsecured, which was unheard of, meaning they're walking around. So in a solitary confinement environment in a prison, in Pennsylvania they have a level system, so that would be a level 5, that's maximum security. Every inmate has to be secured and then escorted by 2 officers anytime they're out of their cell. But the goal was to get these guys out unsecured, and we did that. Did that for about 6 solid years. Things unfortunately changed a little bit within the administration, and so that program ended up eventually having problems. So I also had to blow the whistle on inmate abuse. So I guess my first claim to fame within the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections would be that I started the first intensive treatment program, long-term solitary. Through that, I accrued more clinical contact hours than any other prison psychology staff member in the U.S. or Canada. So as far as boots on the ground, contact hours, I hold the record. So like Silence of the Lambs, where you had Clarice spending time with Hannibal Lecter, I probably spent that much time in a week. So, 6 solid years. From that, what else did I do? Then transitioned to head up one of the state's high-intensity, standalone 65-bed unit for sexually violent predators. So I oversaw treatment with that, while blowing the whistle on inmate abuse. So I was the first psychology staff member in the U.S. to blow the whistle on inmate abuse. And that was an interesting experience as well. I was standing up for inmates that were being abused, including a trans inmate. So people oftentimes try to say that I'm anti-this or anti-trans. I'm not. I'm the only psychology staff member that stepped forward at great cost, by the way. If anybody wants to read that story, you can go to one of my sites, that's churchprotect.org, under the Insights tab, and you will see that the very first drop-down tab called When Called to Do Hard Things. So it's interesting experience. So on that high-intensity forensic unit dealing with sexually violent predators, that was an amazing opportunity. All of it was, really. To do intensive treatment, both intensive treatment and intensive research like no outside academic researcher would ever have the opportunity. And I wasn't looking for it, and so now in retrospect I can see the benefit. And I wouldn't have had the context. I wouldn't have believed that an outside researcher really couldn't get the most out of an interview. But now I understand it. And that's not to say that outside academic researchers don't derive meaningful information. But think about the population. It's a criminal mind. If you're dealing with pedophiles, if you're dealing with sexually violent predators, you're either dealing with highly reactive and impulsive individuals or very methodical. I've worked with all kinds, the full continuum, but the ones that I've really specialized in are the sophisticated ones. Those are the most challenging ones because these are the world's greatest liars. The criminal mind like none else. Those that were able to perpetrate and no one suspect, no one know. I was also trained in the hair psychopathy checklist. You are from Canada. Canada produced Dr. Robert Hare out of the University of British Columbia. He is what's called the godfather of psychopathy. He developed what's called the PCLR, the hair psychopathy checklist. Pennsylvania Department of Corrections flew him in to do specialized training for a handful of select psychology staff, and I was a part of that small group. So we were trained specifically by him. So I'm certified in that, and then went on to work with other populations within the prison, doing also other groups and overseeing the mental health unit. And after 11 years, I decided it was time to retire, so I started 2 sites. One was a training site, still in operation, churchprotect.org. If somebody wants to find out the true truths instead of the urban legends of pedophiles, because there's a lot of urban legends out there now, and that's going to kind of pertain to what we're going to be talking about. I'll give you a couple urban legends, for instance. One is that this has been floated in the literature out there, that men who abuse kids are reenacting their abuse on the age of the victim that they themselves were victimized. So if they choose a 5-year-old, they're reenacting that abuse. And what I have to say that is not true. Now, there's child-on-child offense. And I write about this in my blog. In fact, let me give you my site. Sorry, I jumped into things. So churchprotect.org. I have another site called survivorsupport.net. I have a blog where I've put a lot of my own findings down there. And at some point in time, I will take the time to write and to publish. But it's on there. That is survivorsupport.us. And then we're excited about a new endeavor, a new site with a new podcast. That is, and it fits for what we're going to talk about because the goal is to unmask the trans movement. Mm-hmm. And we really want to unmask this whole thing. So the site is unmaskingthetransmovement.com. And we have a podcast. We're having a lot of really important guests on there, academics as well as people that have been impacted by this. Then, what else? And I have a Friday night program. I really enjoy that. That's live on TECN.TV, 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that I get to deal with regular counseling issues by day. So currently in my life right now, I do teletherapy. So I have a full-time client load, and it's actually very enjoyable for me. And then I have 3, and we're almost ready to have to launch our 4th sex offender treatment group. So I have about 45 men that are currently on parole. They're sex offenders. So I'm still in the field of that. I'm a certified sex offender treatment provider, and I'm a clinical certified clinical trauma provider. So that's
Sounds like
about my
you
background.
sounds like you really got your hands full, John. Now, when it comes to this latest website, Unmasking the Trans Movement, when you unmask anything, what is the most difficult aspect of unmasking and overcoming the lies? Are these people that say one thing, are they just in denial? And do they really believe what they say? Or are they just trying to manipulate? What's the difficulty in unmasking?
I would say the difficulty, probably in the order of difficulty, is to help people understand what is true. It's not even so much people that are in the trans movement. So the first thing I tell people is this, that the trans movement, though it is real because we're even talking about it, we're having to deal with the implications of all of this. But I get to tell people this, that it is not real. Well, that's a shock to the system. They say, what are you talking about? Then I'll even take it one step further to say there's no such thing as trans. Well, now they're, it's like, then I'll even take it one step further. There's no such thing as a trans kid. Now I'm, they're ready to haul me off to prison. What I say is this. Prior to the year 2005, you never heard of this. I've been doing therapy for 30 years, give or take. Started in 1992, and I can tell you prior to the year 2005, this did not exist. There's no such thing as trans. That is a label that's been placed on it. Jennifer Billick of the 11th Hour blog calls it a marketing term, and I concur. There's no such thing as a trans person or a trans kid. There are simply people who are confused at best. And that, my heart goes out to them. That's part of why I am driven to speak about this, because you have a whole lot of people, and I think about 80%. My own, the easiest way to view it is the trans movement, and again, it's a misnomer, I call it the trans deception, but trans movement is comprised of probably about 80%. It's very much like a cult, unfortunately. So it's a cultic movement. It uses, those that are pushing this, they implement the most effective of time-tested cult-like techniques of recruitment. So that would be grooming, manipulation, recruitment, and retention. The best way to understand the movement is to understand the former sex cult NXIVM, Keith Raniere and Allison Mack. It was billed as a self-improvement course. And meanwhile, Keith Raniere was perping on all the women. They had a certain select group of women. These women became so brainwashed. Now, people take offense at the term brainwashed. It's what it is, but what I say now is they were mentally and emotionally manipulated to where they were willing to lay down on a table and be subjected to a doctor, actual doctor, taking a cauterizing tool and branding them near their groin area without anesthesia. Very intelligent individuals, they had to pay a lot of money to be a part of this group. On top of it, there's a lot of parallels. So they were paying a lot of money to subject themselves to the alteration of their bodies. And little did they know that the markings that were being put into their skin that would leave them scarred forever, and there's a very good book called Scarred about the NXIVM sex cult. It turns out that the design, they were told that this is a way of being loyal, and this is to, they were told a number of things about what these markings were, but it happened to be the initials of Keith Raniere and Allison Mack. They became the property of these two individuals. Allison Mack, both are doing a lot of prison time. Keith Raniere is never going to get out. Allison Mack, I forget the deal she cut. But there was sex trafficking as well. There was exploitation. So the way to understand the trans movement, really those pushing it, about 80% are the victims of this grand scheme. So you have a small group coming at what I call special interests, or the dark special interests, that represent a number of different ways of capitalizing upon and benefiting from the carcasses of these young gender-confused kids that have been manipulated. So again, the best way to understand it is review the methods employed by NXIVM, the sex cult, and Scientology. So it's mental and emotional manipulation, kids, to get them onto what amounts to a moving sidewalk it's heading somewhere. At any point in time, a kid gets onto this movement, this moving sidewalk, I'll tell you exactly where it ends, and parents and good people need to understand this. It is predictable. I'll tell you the path of this movement. Wherever your kid gets on, they'll eventually be sterilized and dumped out onto a surgeon's gurney where they will be amputated. They'll have their sex organs amputated. And they will be a customer for life of Big Pharma. That's what this is all about. And they will be left very susceptible. Quite frankly, along the way, they will be easy prey for sexual predators. So this is the greatest man-made psychological ruse, scam, and scheme that's ever existed, that is preying upon gender-confused young people who have untreated mental health issues. And this movement seeks to gain access to the private spaces and private parts of women and children. It's the greatest threat that's ever come down the pike. It's now in schools. And if any parent thinks that they can afford not to think of this, their kid, by degree, is going to get sucked into this. And my warning to parents is, if they've ever heard their kid reference two things, their kid's already being impacted by it and potentially groomed. Just two simple things. If you ever hear the words non-binary come out of your child's mouth, or pronouns, you cannot afford not to address this, because somebody is vying for your child's attention and they intend to make profit or prey of your child.
I see a lot of this stuff happening in schools, and this behavior is celebrated. Not only is it celebrated, but anybody that stands up and speaks against it is labeled all sorts of things. Now, I don't really care too much about these labels because at the end of the day, I have kids and I'm going to speak the truth and what I want to see, and no amount of policies that enable this behavior is going to make it right. And no amount of people that stand behind this behavior is going to make this right. And I do think a lot of parents are becoming more aware of it. And I've come across your work when I listened to Rebel News. You did a very interesting segment, and the things that you were saying were eye-opening to me. And I got to say, when you said people who were abused don't abuse at the same, that's a line that I believed myself, and I used to, it's kind of a way to gain compassion in a way, and excuse that behavior. But really, there is no excuse for this behavior. And a lot of the things, like we have policies in school, trans policy, really, that give access to men to go in women's washrooms and change rooms. Now, I don't see a lot of women going to the men's place, but they say, we're going to accommodate and we're going to go above and beyond to protect privacy. And I'm not seeing too much privacy protection. As a matter of fact, the only thing that's different than what is traditional is the fact that men can have access to women's spaces at the expense of making all the women uncomfortable to make one man feel comfortable. So what is going on?
They feel very comfortable.
So tell me,
walking into washrooms and change rooms, they feel very comfortable, meaning they're loving life.
So what is going on through their mind when it comes to this? Do they really feel like a woman, or do they like making women feel uncomfortable?
They like making women feel uncomfortable because they're predatorial. Now, I hear it, right? I just heard, Uhler's anti, and he's the... No, the question is this. For those that suddenly had shock value, you simply ask this: to what extent have you studied sexual predators? What does that have to do? Let me ask you again. To what extent have you studied sexual predators? Again, what does that have? Okay. I say it has everything to do with it. What I say is this. No man thinks it's a reasonable proposition. Interesting term. But no man thinks it's reasonable to dress in women's underwear and drag unless he's become sexually deviant. In this day and age, ever since Hugh Hefner and Playboy was launched, you will not have a man that perpetrates a sexual offense that has not been deeply steeped in pornography prior to that. Now, at this point, people quickly say, those that are predators and predator apologists, what they will quickly say is, so you're suggesting the issue is porn. Well, what about prior to porn? Well, I'm very clear at this point. The issue is not porn. The issue is sexual deviance. Let me repeat that. Men do not offend because of porn. They offend because of sexual deviance. Pornography and the internet supercharge the process. It goes real fast. So, is pornography an issue? 100%. Does pornography underlie all of sex offending? Correct. Because it supercharges deviance. What sexual deviance is the twisting of a man's mind into the realm of sexual psychopathy. There are two kinds of psychopaths. I'm certified in the Harris Psychopathy Checklist. I have done hundreds of forensic sex offender evaluations and risk assessments. That's what I do for a living. I have over 12,000 clinical contact hours working with sex offenders, men who have crossed sexual boundaries. For those that want to give pushback at this moment, I simply ask this. Tell me how many hours you have spent studying the criminal mind and the sexual deviant mind, and in what context, and then I may listen to your pushback. If you care about the safety of women and children, then you're going to be careful not to misplace the sympathies to where they don't belong, which is deviant men. I don't care about the sensitivities of deviant men. I care about the safety of women and children, as we all should. When a man dresses in drag, it's probably safe to say he's also got women's underwear on. My guess. Why? Because I've read enough police reports. No man thinks it's a reasonable thing to do unless he's become deviant by degree. In this day and age, a man does not become deviant without pornography. So what you have is any man that dresses in women's underwear and drag, okay, maybe he's got men's briefs on. Any man that dresses in drag, women's clothing, to then, in addition to all that, insist upon or endeavoring to access private spaces of women and children, he's not only deviant, but now he's predatorial. How can I say that? 14 plus years working with men who have deeply steeped themselves deeply in porn and have crossed boundaries. Well, that's a different subset of that. Now those are the ones that got busted. Do you think the men that I work with, the first time they did it is when they got busted? What were they before they got busted? The same. They finally got caught, which means you have men out there that are doing what? With guys I work with. See, we want to think, well, John, the guys that you work with, they're a subset of the guys that access porn. No, they're not. It's on a continuum. And the question is this: are you willing to risk the safety and welfare of women and children for what? For an agenda? So that we can make sure that these men that are hypersexualized, that want to gain access to women and children, and quite frankly, I don't care what adults do with other adults. I may have my own personal opinion about that. I've never shared that. Some people can probably surmise, that's fine. But you will never find in anything I've said, and I've said a lot now that's recorded. I have a YouTube channel, Jon K. Uhler, LPC. I've written a lot, different blog posts. I challenge anybody to find anything I've ever said about the homosexual lifestyle, though I don't think it's beneficial. I don't think it's the best lifestyle. How can I say that? You look at the rates of issues they have and the amount of deviance that's within the gay lifestyle, the male lifestyle, and you have real issues. I mean, you don't have the male gay lifestyle any longer without bondage and whips and all sorts of leather and abject deviance. As a matter of fact, do you know what happens at gay bathhouse? As a matter of fact, just recently there was a video, I posted about it. I don't even know the guy's name. I think he was on the Grammys, where just abject deviance. Mm-hmm. Where Sam, whatever his name, I forgot. 12 million views in 3 weeks. I should go on and find this. But it's all about, I don't want a lover, I just want friend, or I don't want friends, I want a lover. But this guy is basically just into kink, deviant, gay stuff. And part of the scenes is he's walking along and all these guys are peeing. They call that golden showers. Well, you tell me. If that's part of your erotic thing, are you normal? You get off of people peeing on each other? That's debase. So don't try to defend this lifestyle to me, for those of you that are. Okay? This is a depraved lifestyle that is driven because of pornography, because of deviance. So the pornography supercharges the process, and there are predictable stages downward where a person's mind, not the brain, not the gray matter, white matter IQ points, but the mind, the way it processes and its values, and its appetites, and its interests, and its inclinations, it becomes inverted to where a man naturally was designed to be chivalrous, to be protective. The captain goes down with the ship, and a man's word was his bond, and you protect women and children. Now they become predatorial, they become selfish, they become manipulative. They will break their word at the drop of a hat. They look for loopholes. It's the polar opposite of genuine manhood. And so now, throw everybody else overboard and under the bus, and they morph through various stages eventually into psychopathy and deviance. So the process starts with attraction. Everybody starts with attraction, moves into lust. Now you're getting into objectification. It slowly progresses, and you watch. This will match the kind of pornography they're into. It eventually gets into power and control, and then it gets into the beginning of harming. Think about what BDSM is. Whips and chains. What do you do with those? You harm someone. It's no longer about normal attraction. Because someone that has normal attraction cannot get sexually aroused if their partner is not enjoying him or herself. Meaning if your partner is not enjoying herself. Meaning you have to be in the mood. So you're only in the mood if your partner is in the mood. If she's not enjoying herself, you won't either. That's a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
You can't enjoy yourself at her expense. You just can't. It's not in you. The further you go downhill, eventually, not only are you, it doesn't matter whether she's enjoying herself. I haven't even hit the realm of deviance, by the way, in that stage. That's pure objectification. That's lust, starting to get power and control. But eventually, I'm going to get into dominance, which is a little more than power and control. Then I'm going to start getting into being aroused by the negative effect. Now I'm into deviance. That means as a man, I'm getting an erection over, I'm getting excited by creating pain. But not just pain that is scarring and marring the soul. You see how far and how different that is from a normal guy that cannot enjoy himself unless the person is enjoying herself. As a matter of fact, when you get into deviance, he can't get an erection if that person's enjoying herself.
Mm-hmm.
You are now no longer normal, and you lose the desire, and this is what's important. It's in this stage that a guy will begin to dress, or partway through, dress in women's underwear and drag, and he's probably also, here it is, stealing the underwear. By the time a man is stealing women's underwear, how do we know if he's stealing women's underwear? Only by the time he's busted, and by the time they're busted, guess how many pairs of underwear, and the owners, it's not one owner, it's multiple owners, and he's been stealing underwear for a long period of time. By the time a man steals underwear, which is a trophy, because he is conquering and he is debasing them, and by the way, he's masturbating in the pairs of underwear, it is similar to a man walking in to a woman's restroom or a locker room and taking a picture of himself in drag. Now, welcome to the trans deception.
Mm-hmm.
These are very dangerous individuals, and people need to understand it. Yet we're subjecting women and children to this, including in sports. And then we're subjecting women who are female inmates to these deviant men that go in. I can tell you this, 100% of the men that are requesting access to go into a female prison have sexually harmed, sexually traumatized, and violated, whether ever busted for it or not, or they pled the charges down. Because people say, well, only 50% of them are sex offenders. I have a very simple challenge to anybody from any state, any country, any province. You pay for it, but until you can prove me wrong, here's the reality that 100% of the men that are requesting to go into female prisons are a threat, an absolute threat to the women that are in there. Because the quote-unquote genuine trans guys, they don't want to go into a women's prison. Why? Because they like the attention. Because the vast majority of them, I don't really know an exception. There were 5 on my caseload at SEI Somerset. Okay. The majority of them were into male prostitution. Well, you tell me which prison would they rather be in? Of course, they want to be in the male prison. And they're very protected, by the way. So, and the genuine trans know. Every inmate knows that only the deviant guys that want access to the women that are vulnerable, only the deviant guys are going to presume to gain access to that. Even Jen Smith, I'm shifting for a second, Jen Smith, a legitimate trans in Canada who's calling for a national inquiry, he's the one trying to generate attention that 40% of those kids that are being medicalized within the trans deception, trans movement, 40% are coming out of the foster care system. Jen actually came out of the foster care system. He claims to be a male. He doesn't do any of these. He's legitimate in the sense that he's not allowing people to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. It was very interesting when I interviewed him. He said he could go into the women's washroom because to look at him, he looks like a female. But he said this, I wouldn't want to do that to a woman. I wouldn't want to put her in that awkward position.
Yeah, this stuff, like, it's across the board right now. It seems like our culture is infected with this mindset from schools and policies that protect this, getting the drag queens in the school, getting the books out, normalizing it, parents taking their kids to drag shows. I've never seen anything like it. And we really are, well, not me, but parents are sacrificing their kids on the woke altar with the lifelong ramifications of medical sterilization and physical castration of their kids before they have a chance to even have a family. It's so interesting. I definitely see this cult mentality, and I never would have thought that we not only celebrate this, not only promote this, but anybody that speaks against it is labeled as being hateful or whatnot. It's a completely backwards culture. I think it's a deviant culture. Maybe we've reached deviance as a culture where we take pleasure in this atrocity and harm that we're doing to others. And when it comes to school stuff, do you think parents are aware of this, or do you think they're naive? What's your take on this?
I think it's kind of all the above, so it depends upon what parent you're thinking of, but I'll describe the kinds of parents. Before that, I want to add one other piece so I can help parents, because I may have lost part of our audience at the beginning when I said this. The trans movement doesn't, or the trans movement doesn't exist. Of course it exists. That's why we're talking about this thing. But it's not real. It's a marketing scheme. How can I say it's not real? I mean, what is it that's not real? What's the issue we're talking about? The premise is, so the entire trans movement is based upon a premise, which is that you can have kids that are born in the wrong body. Clinically, I'll tell you what that is. That's called delusional disorder. How can I say that? Used to have a phrase, everybody used to accept it. It's sort of like that series of books called, like, For Dummies. You have Mechanics for Dummies, or Computers for Dummies. I can relate for that, right? It was another way of saying, well, like, entry-level college course tends to be 101, so math 101. Well, there used to be a phrase that we all kind of knew. It was biology 101. So we would oftentimes say, kind of basic, it's like biology 101. What did we mean by that? So you don't tend to hear that phrase anymore. That phrase simply means this. There are certain things that are self-evident that are right in front of your face. That's just biology 101, meaning males and females just are. It ain't hard to figure it out. There's a dangling participle with a male. What about intersex? Okay, 0.000 whatever. 30 years of counseling, never come across one. Well, that's because I didn't feel comfortable to spare me. Neither did any of my colleagues. That's because you all were narrow-minded. See how this reasoning goes. The reality is this. You can counsel for decades and never come across a genuine intersex person. They're very, very, very rare. It's troubling, of course. Okay, but again, think of how many different settings I have counseled at. I've never come across a single intersex person. It's really rare, kind of like an albino. They're out there, but you're not going to come across one. So the question is, where did all this come from? If you look at the rates, so it's just statistics now, on a graph chart. If you look at rates of referrals to transgender medical profession, for actual transgender medicine, we're thinking of intersex. Because really what you're saying is, if a child is born in the wrong body, then they're intersex. If you look at the rates of referrals, which should tell you everything, there are no rates of referrals. There's a little blip starting about 2009. one or two. It starts to increase a little bit. There's a little bit of a blip around 2010-ish until you hit 2013. Have you ever seen a tidal wave?
I think we're in a tidal wave right now. Cultural
Right?
tidal wave, yeah.
A trend is a trend line. It's like a little foothill mountain. You start to walk up this hill. It just kind of gradually goes up. The tidal wave sucks out all the way, so it's shoreline, and then all of a sudden this thing. Okay, that's not natural. When it comes to human behavior, if you have behavior that suddenly changes in a really dramatic fashion, somebody is manipulating that behavior. For instance, that's not, well, we might call it a fad, but fads don't, fads are like what color jeans you wear, not you chop off your breasts. A little bit different as far as implications. We've had pet rocks, chia pets, go through little fads, okay? But not where we create policies and procedures and laws and throw people in jail if they speak against this. A little bit different. Big different. Why? This is now worldwide, according to Jennifer Billick. She's done a nice job on the 11th Hour blog, following the money and calculating. Worldwide, this is a multi-trillion dollar industry. When you get big money, whole different ballgame. We don't want to believe that in the healthcare industry that there would be unethical people, that there would be unscrupulous doctors. But that's because we want to believe that human nature isn't what it is. We want to believe that doctors would never order unnecessary tests or might excise or take out certain body parts. We don't want to believe that they would use us as a means to an end for an extra yacht. But we give human nature too much credit. How do you explain Nazi doctors 10 years before Hitler came along? They changed, did they? Or did circumstances change and therefore they morphed? But the power, the greed factor. You have doctors right now that are more than happy, sad, are more than happy to view young people, troubled teenagers that give all sorts of signs. As a matter of fact, there's 9 red flag clinical indicators of sexual abuse. Every doctor is a mandated reporter. They know what these signs are. How about self-injurious behavior? Cutting on yourself. I have all sorts of pictures where the doctors that have sliced off the breasts of young women, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, have all sorts of self-cutting all over them. Shouldn't a doctor, assess first? Well, they see these scars. Shouldn't a doctor, if you see a scar on somebody's wrist, you see cutting on a girl, what should go through your mind? First thing should be sexual abuse. So you should ask, hey, what's this about? Rather than keep your mouth shut. Why? Because you're going to schedule this young girl for surgery tomorrow. So you can make $40,000. And you're going to have to slice through some of those scars that are already there. Sexual trauma creates a dissociative state. And yes, in certain dissociative states, somebody will say, just also like a rape victim, I don't want to be a girl, I wish I was a boy. Why would they say that? Because in their mind, if they weren't a girl, the abuse wouldn't be happening. So we already take a traumatized young person, and now we're going to do what to them? So we're adding injury to insult now. Now that's on the back end. The front end, schools, are being used to groom. It's all grooming. The books, As a matter of fact, the books that are being used right now are the pushers of the trans movement. If any of the men in my sex offender treatment groups, if any of the men were found in possession of any of those books, they'd be violated out of group and sent back to prison. Those are the kind of books predators use to groom kids. Those are sexually deviant books. The only reason the teachers are not arrested is because those are drawing. Now, what do I say about the parents? Kind of run the gamut. You have, at the very least, you have very naive parents that want to just be nice and get along with everybody. And they don't want to, quote unquote, judge. No, I don't want to judge anybody, but you better be discerning. Do you judge what you put in your kid's mouth or the kind of food? Right? You have to be discerning in order to be protective. If you do not protect, then you're a negligent parent. And I'm here to tell you, people, unscrupulous people, predatory people, are very actively seeking to gain access to your kids. That's why, for instance, we talk about stranger danger. Why don't you let your kid go to the park by him or herself, or go to the playground and not watch the kid? Right? We said, well, no, you wouldn't do that. I can't believe you'd even suggest that, John, because there are strangers out there. Okay, what kind of strangers? You know, the creepy guys. Okay? How are they creepy? Well, they drive around in vans. And they're going to snatch a kid. I'm not minimizing any of that. I've worked with those kind of guys. Mm-hmm. That's few and far between. That is very few. You know, do you want to know what the majority of the sexual predators look like? And where you find them? They look very normal.
I heard...
That's why they have so...
Yeah, I heard a lot of these people, the predators themselves are even maybe family members, but maybe you can, and maybe this is how they get the easiest access to kids. But I'd love to hear more on what you think on this.
Yeah, we're all fearful of. Understandably, I'm a dad of 3 kids. My kids are grown now. You should see me at the park when I'm right. Any normal parent these days are hypervigilant. And that, by the way, is how you can tell whether or not somebody has been perpetrated upon. Okay. Genuine survivors, so the premise is, well, man's acting out his own sexual trauma. That's what happened with pedophiles. Okay. The reason I can say it's not true, now that's different than child-on-child offense, but if you have a child that's been perped on, you're going to see that child act out, one extreme or the other, become aggressive or withdrawn. And that's why child on child, meaning somebody perped on that child, now they're perping on another child. No child will remain the same if they've been sexually abused. Let's say it happens at 3rd grade, 4th grade. You mean to tell me that they can make it all the way through elementary school, junior high, middle school, high school, look perfectly normal and unscathed, perfectly well adjusted, not do drugs or alcohol to manage the pain, not become sexually promiscuous? You mean look like the valedictorian? Really? And you've worked with how many survivors and how many kids in the system? If you believe that, you're either dangerously naive or you have no clue, or you're lying through your teeth. Okay, trust me, this is my career. Mm-hmm. I worked with very troubled, severely emotionally disturbed kids. You perp on a child, that child is now impacted. What these sophisticated predators want us to believe is this. And how do I define a sophisticated predator? It's when the guy was busted. So if you want to find a low-budget, impulsive guy versus sophisticated, you just listen to the people around him when the news hits. You're going to hear one of 2 things typically. You're going to hear people say, yeah, they always send a news crew out to the home, out in front of the house or in front of the church or whatever, eyewitness news. They're here to talk about so-and-so was perping on kids, found out child porn. And okay, so they interview neighbors. And so you'll hear one of 2 things. Either Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise us. He was a creepy guy. We told all the kids, stay away from him. Or he just kind of, I don't know, he's kind of shut in, stayed by himself. Okay. So people either didn't know much about him, or they had a suspicion, or they really had some concerns. That's going to be one end of the continuum. The other is this. The response would be this. Can't believe it. No, I just can't. Why? Pastor so, the teacher so and so, instructor so and so, psychologist so and so, not Congressman so and so, not Bill Clinton, not Bill Clinton is the working definition of a white collar psychopath, by the way. Two kinds of psychopath, bloody and white collar. Bernie Madoff, Robert Hare uses Bernie Madoff, who made off with everybody's money. He was on the NASDAQ. How about Larry Nassar, the U.S. Olympic team, the gymnastics team? He was the Olympic doctor for the female gymnasts for how many years? Well, when the victims finally found out about one another, then they're empowered. How many victims came forward? That's a sophisticated predator. Now, let me ask you, was Larry Nassar, was he abused as a kid? Absolutely not. Okay. Was he suffering from low self-esteem? No. They'll all say they were. Okay. How can I tell the difference? Because a genuine survivor is protective. They're hypervigilant. They're the helicopter parents. Why? Because they know what happened to them, and they're not letting anybody get close to their kid. Genuine survivors are protective, not exploitive.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody wants to truly study within a prison setting, those men that were sexually abused as kids, you don't go to the sex offender treatment unit. You go to the drug and alcohol unit. People need to understand that, because our degree of ignorance, our degree of ignorance is being played. We're being played because of our ignorance. We're being played for fools, and that's what psychopaths like to do. It's chess, it's chess for them. It's entertainment. So they can get us to misplace our sympathies onto them and away from the survivors, which then ultimately leaves future victims, leaves women and children at risk of being victimized, because the perps and their apologists have been so good at flipping the script and making these men out to be the victims, where our sympathies go out to be them, and we have to make accommodations for them. Meanwhile, now the wolf is in the hen house. So at the school, though, to bring it back, what kind of parents? You have either the well-meaning, but I would say this, the dangerously naive. Because again, what people need to understand about this movement is this: it didn't exist until 2013. So going back to the referral rates, it's in 2013 that everything shoots up. If you doubt it, run the numbers. Just type in, do this little internet search, rates of referrals for gender referral clinics in England, in Australia, in France. Just run the numbers. And you will see consistently 2013. They all bump up. Not just bump up, it skyrockets up. What happened in 2013? If you have the world over, Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, what happened in 2013? If it's worldwide, meaning zero until about 2008 or 9, there's a little blip around 2010, RuPaul Drag Race in 2009. Oh, men dressing in, yep, okay. And then it went down a little bit, but that was the first real blip. RuPaul Drag Race. What happened in 2013? Only one thing. The DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the Psychological Bible that has all the billing codes, was published and made one small little change. Suddenly, the gender identity disorder was always focused on young kids, because it was young boys that might have an issue. Very rare, quite frankly. Suddenly, it included teenagers. And in 2013, all of this became profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Without the DSM-5 and the 13 individuals that oversaw this, including Blanchard and Zucker, which I challenge them, if they have integrity, they will renounce this whole thing and put it back to the DSM-4. Everything was fine. But they won't. I hate to say it. I mean, they're very much leader in our field. They're published, I'm not, but I don't care. I think they have integrity, they would. But I say they're moral cowards. If you've created a Frankenstein monster, if you've unleashed this thing, be man enough, be adult enough, be professional enough, be expert enough to own it and apologize so that no more kids are going to be harmed. Because if you go back to 2004, nobody can bill for this. Without the ability to bill for this, and without pornography, the influence of pornography, those pushing it, those introducing it to kids, and its other influences. So without the DSM-5 and the influence of pornography, this entire thing goes away. Back to the numbers we saw in 2005, which is 0. So parents need to understand what's happening in schools, what's happening in kids. It's a grand grooming, meaning a mental and emotional influencing scheme to introduce sexualized thoughts to your kids before they reach puberty, which means they have no clue really about the meaning and the implications. They start to get confused, and they now are much easier prey for sexual predators. And the two primary special interests, really you can take all of it, summarize it this. Somebody's either trying to make money off of your kid, or they're trying to cross the sexual boundaries of your kids, and that's pushing the trans movement that in my mind represent about 20% of this. Those are the ones behind the scenes, but those are the ones that are getting policies and procedures changed. Those are the ones that are influencing legislation and judicial sentencing, what judges are doing, but laws.
Mm-hmm.
These are the ones that are hell-bent on changing things. Why? Because they will benefit in their perspective, meaning they're either going to benefit financially or, and a big part of my concern, because my background clinically, is there's a subgroup, which is the most dangerous, call them pedophiles. And they're using this to do an end run on age of consent. And they're doing that by backdooring the ability to gain access to kids. And they're doing it by this term called bodily autonomy. It was pushed during COVID. That meant we have to let kids decide for themselves to get the jab, to get the shot, even if the parents are against it, because that kid needs the ability and the right to control their own destiny, what goes on with their body. Guess what a perpetrator is doing with that? And so now you're hearing the term bodily autonomy. What does that mean? That a kid can decide at age 12, at age 10, to take hormone blockers. Well, how are they going to do that? Somebody's going to take them off site to Planned Parenthood. Who's going to take them off site? An adult. Same adult that's helping them change into clothing, that's giving them different pronouns, that's keeping information from you as a parent, that has designs eventually to say that your kid is no longer your kid, but the community's kid, the family, this new community. That's what a cult does.
Mm-hmm.
Predators look for, they're always testing boundaries, and they're testing resolve. They're testing the degree of naivety. So all a perpetrator or predator needs to see is you have a pride flag, you have a pride rainbow, you do the LGBT, whatever. These are all methods by which they're testing your level of discernment. If you allow, if you embrace, if you bring your kid to a drag queen story hour, you're being scanned and scammed, and they're taking note. First of all, these predators are taking note of the community's resolve. If the community doesn't get pushed back, and if the parents don't get pushed back, if the parents hand these kids over, where do you think pedophiles are going to flock to or view it as easy pickings and fertile hunting ground. Your neighborhood and your schools. They're testing to see whether or not you are truly that stupid to believe it's about reading. If it truly was about reading, why don't they go read to old folks that are shut in at convalescent hospitals?
Yeah, they'll take any ability. They'll take anything, reading or math. We had a drag queen at our school. She loves math. And he said, we're breaking boundaries. Kids can be anything.
Well, that's exactly what they are.
Indeed.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. They are breaking boundaries, ironically. And the school made it sound like this is one of those love is love signs on the lawn. And it's just so crazy to me that this stuff is talked about so positively. And as a matter of fact, I've noticed something that the school has done lately, and this was recent. They've actually stopped referring to parents as parents, and they say family. So they say students, educators, and family. Because I think parents...
Because now it's morally equivalent because they can be a family. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Which is really...
an attack upon parental right.
Yeah. So people, when they think of family, they think about their mom and dad and whatnot. But their uncles and aunts, they don't really have that authority over the kids, even though they are part of an extended family. But I think what they want with, like you mentioned, with this whole family thing, I mean, anybody could be a family. And when you give family the ability, then you can corrupt that word as well and make yourself part of the family.
There you go. And therefore you now own the child. So if the child then decides that you're the new family, so if I'm a predator and I want after your child, the majority of predators, this speaks to the question you had, the vast majority of predators gain access to a child through consistent contact. So they have consistent access, so they have consistent contact. That means they're in or friends with the family. So should we be aware and concerned about stranger danger? Of course. But that's very few people if that ever happens to. The vast majority of sexual molestation and abuse comes from people within the family or people they know. Churches are actually the greatest concern of mine, by the way. The most sophisticated of predators love targeting churches because they love playing good people for fools, and they have a disdain for the good. And because they're driven by a dark malevolence for good, for that which is pure, and by the way, that's why they have a malevolence toward women. Most people by now are probably aware that you have these men that are yelling at women, saying, calling them TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists, but they'll say, like, kill TERFs, die TERFs. So now we got domestic terrorists, basically, threatening these women, beating the hell out of these women, traumatizing these women, these deviant men. Why? Because pornography causes a man to have a deep malevolence toward women. That's why men eventually, once they become deeply steeped in this depraved porn, they enjoy seeing women harmed, such as a man's hand on her throat and he's choking her. Eventually they get into bestiality, and eventually they get into child porn and then snuff porn. People need to understand these men are very dark and deviant. If you want to be a deviant man, that's fine. But don't be around kids. And don't be around women. Stay with your nightclubs, stay with your gay bathhouses where you have, I forget how many partners per year. Just do your own thing. But don't be around kids. Simple as that. Just like furries. Parents need to understand furries, which is a big costume. People, quite frankly, it's a very deviant group. I first heard about furries from pedophiles, a very extreme pedophile in prison. I'd never heard of furries. So these are people that dress up like mascot costumes at a sporting event or like at Disneyland. How much of somebody's identity is covered up in a costume?
100%.
100%.
Can't even tell if it's a man or a woman.
There you go. But 100% of the identity is covered up. How about with a drag queen? How much of identity is covered up? Pretty much 100%. You don't know who that person is.
Yeah.
The pedophile said this. He said, Mr. Uhler, it's amazing. You dress up and parents will hand their kids over to you. And how can I prove that furries is a very dangerous thing for minors? So parents do not allow your kids to be involved with furries. Gee, should we be surprised? And along with trans deception, we now start to see kids dressing as little furries. Girls going with cattails and ears and little paws. Okay? It's all grooming. Why? Because men that descend into deviance eventually would get into bestiality. Have you ever heard the term pup play?
Unfortunately, I have.
Okay. Bestiality comes prior to child porn. These men, you'll see this pup play stuff with bondage stuff. See the process, see the stair-step process downwards. Predators simply know that the average person, the average parent, is unaware of the degrees of deviance. So they think these are just fun-loving men that like to play dress-up and want to access kids. So with furries, what I say is this. And to any self-respecting furry, there aren't any, but if there were, right, it shouldn't be a big deal if I say this. Come out into the public, do a public statement saying, you know what, we care so much about protecting kids because we're aware of the fact that you can't tell who we are. So furries is now just 18 and older. They will come unglued. They will try to get you fired. They'll seek out where you work. If you have a professional license, they will demand an inquiry of your professional license. I've had all this stuff. Mm-hmm. They will send glitter bombs to your home. They'll threaten to firebomb your home. I had to get the FBI involved. Over what? Simply saying that furries is not safe for kids. Ooh, poke an anthill and guess what comes pouring out? A hornet's nest. Where there's heat, there's fire. It's the most deviant group. Do not allow your kids to be around furries. Once they're 18, and every furry should be satisfied with that. Why are they so agitated if somebody discloses how deviant they are? And they're very deviant. Mm-hmm. Right? Even people that come out of furries will talk about how sick these people are as far as twisted deviants. So why don't they say, you know what, all things being equal, it's an adult thing because they want access to kids. And a lot of the kids are on the autism spectrum. The one thing that sexual abuse survivors and kids on the autism spectrum have in common is a difficult time with their intuition. Intuition allows someone to test reality. It's the thing that says, I know that I know. It allows for boundaries. If you have a difficult time with your intuition, you can't discern, and therefore you're susceptible to somebody come along saying, oh, you know what? I know what it looks like, but it's really not that. And so now the predator, the perpetrator, has an easier time getting over on, we call that grooming, your boundaries. So it's really not, this is just what adults do. This is just our special little relationship. No, this is how we share love. After all, love is love. Love knows no age, no boundaries. Love, you're just an old soul in a young body, and I'm a very young soul in an old body. We really harmonize together, and every child thinks, well, oh, they understand me. They're special, and they're being perked on. They're being groomed. This is just our little secret.
Thankfully, the furry culture is, as far as I'm aware, not very big over here. I have been up to, we have a place called Blue Mountain where they had like a cosplay convention, and that's when I've seen some furries and a bunch of people in other costumes as well. But for the most part, I'm happy that maybe I'm not in the culture, because to me, when I see the furries, it's just so cringe when I see grown adults who refuse to grow up.
That's right. And what I say is this: there's a time and a place, David. I appreciate actual historical reenactment. Here in the States, it's the Civil War, Revolutionary War, war between the North and South, whatever. That's neat because you can take kids there, and the reenactment, it's quite something to see it in action. You see the cavalry, and it's quite something. But each of those actors, what you will find is this: they love to talk about the history of it. They're in character, but they've absorbed. They can tell you details about that era. They have books. All those reenactors have a lot of history books. When it comes to the other things, I'm going to get myself in trouble, but I don't care. You've got people that are into Star Wars. I know some. Okay. What I say is this. But the furries is just straight up deviant. Okay. Right. What I want to challenge any adult, especially the men, unless you're a historical reenactor like that, there's only so much time in a day. There's only so many days off. At some point in time, okay, maybe one day. Okay, one day. But aren't there people in need in your neighborhood that you could actually put together a work day, a volunteer day, where you could take young men or young kids, you take your kids, high school kids, and go do service projects. Instead of being around a bunch of adults that are developmentally stuck, they want to play dress up, that breeds narcissism, how about spending your weekend that you're going to go spend how much money to play what? How about fixing a roof on a single woman, a single mother who doesn't have the money to? How about that? Let's get outside of ourselves and get into the lives of people that really have. How about a soup kitchen? So what I would tell normal adults, what I tell any adults is, time to grow up, stop the cosplay, because all it does is it's developmentally stuck and it breeds narcissism. Time to grow up and get in the lives of other people in a healthy way in service projects. Then you'll find, by the way, that a lot of the mental health issues start to go away. It's amazing how the more you volunteer, the less depressed and anxious you get.
Yep. That's true. And I want to encourage all the viewers and the listeners as well. There's so much stuff going on in the schools. I highly recommend people get involved and speak up against this stuff. There's a lot of work to do, and I got into it. I didn't even know what I was getting myself into, and now I'm having this conversation with Jon where I'm learning things. And even though I know what I'm about to hear, Jon, and even though I expect to hear things, especially in this culture, it's always makes me uncomfortable, because this kind of stuff is it's disturbing, right? So when you say from your experience and when I see things happening, it's just really hard to, it always takes me time to process. And even though I find myself in disbelief all the time, I'm not in disbelief anymore, because we've reached a point where, something happens, and then a new drag queen comes up and a new show comes and new books come in the library. And I could see it coming, but I'm also in disbelief at the same time. It's like I'm stuck between these worlds. I wanted to say before we wrap up, is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to say, whether it's to parents or to kids, especially in regards to what's happening in the schools and the books available and the teachings and all this stuff?
I would say to kids that if you are becoming confused, then somebody is causing that confusion. If you're a boy, you're a boy. If you're a girl, you're a girl. Relax in that and begin to focus on, if you can, First of all, I would get off the internet. The internet is not going to help you whatsoever. Begin to find out what you're good at. You are made unique, and therefore you have unique gifts and talents and abilities, and find out what those are. You have a unique set of fingerprints. God has given that to you. Begin to find out what you're good at. And then all this other stuff will start to fade away. If all your friends are that, you know what? You may have to kind of find different friends. It's going to be healthier for you. So probably the reason why you're confused is either your peer group, you're hearing a lot of stuff at school, stuff on the internet, so I get off the internet. Or if somebody also has been touching you sexually, you need to tell a safe adult that you know is not going to keep a secret. They're going to help you stop this person. Because if they're touching you, if they're grooming you, they're doing it to other young people. That's called a sexual predator. That's what I would say to kids. To adults, to parents, I would say you have to be vigilant. You have to begin to risk believing that there really are bad people out there. And not all predators look abnormal. As a matter of fact, the more psychopathic somebody becomes, a sophisticated psychopath, he actually looks more normal, and that's why they're able to get voted into office. We can trust them with our money. Look at Judas. All the disciples gave him the checkbook. He looked really normal. They thought he was really religious and spiritual and all that. So you can be fooled. To those involved in the education system, teachers and administrators, teachers, remember you are a mandated reporter. If I were to ask you, list off the 9 key red flag indicators of sexual abuse. Could you do that? You should be able to rattle it off real fast. If you don't, then how do you know that what you're being told is gender confusion is not symptomatic of a child being hurt on? You need to know that. If you see any man that's unusually interested in things related to kids, sex, and sexuality, you're probably dealing with a perpetrator. How can I say that? You're more likely to. How can I say that? Because think about the average man in a counseling situation. What I hear from women, and it's classic across the world, it simply is this. The complaint that most mothers have about husbands is twofold. He won't talk to me, and he won't spend time with the kids. Most normal guys, unfortunately, we need to be reminded to spend time with our kids. Go throw the ball with your child. Right? It's not, you don't have to do something big, take them to Disneyland, but just spend quality time. Quality versus quantity time. Where did that topic come from? Because most men won't spend time with their kids. But suddenly we have men that are dressed deviantly that really want to spend time with other people's kids. That's a problem. A red flag is a kid magnet. Not a guy. Mm-hmm. Especially, think about the trans stuff. It's all dealing with sex and sexuality. For school administrators, you need to understand predators are targeting your everything from school boards to your school. And you will increase the likelihood of sexual assaults the more you allow the trans deception and the pushers of the trans movement to come in, because your ability to discern, to keep kids safe, especially with same-sex bathrooms or restrooms or washrooms, is compromised. And boys, unfortunately, every year they're accessing more pornography. And then with the books, you're introducing what? More porn. You cannot take young boys, hypersexualize them, and think that your student body of girls are going to be safe, including young kids. You will be held accountable someday for this. So make sure that you do not take a low bar approach to child protection. You raise the bar. You always raise the bar in child protection. All things trans movement will necessitate taking a low bar approach to child protection.
That's right. Well said. In regards to the kids being off the internet, I don't have a TV at my house, and I always encourage my girls to go outside, and I'm perfectly happy when they are bored, because that's an opportunity for them to do something. Go draw, go go play with your Lego, go read a book. And when they were a little bit younger, I've made the mistake of putting the girls on the tablet, but it took me about a year to wean them off the tablet. And
create a little addict.
Yeah.
It's true.
And let me tell you, the difference between having access to the tablet or the phone and all this stuff, which they don't, is night and day difference. And my girls do not act out in public. They're respectful. They help me around the house. They put away clothes and they do their laundry and they clean the room. And, you know, like I'm teaching them every day a little bit more, right? It started from maybe just teaching just a little bit. Come over here and help me crack an egg, to here you can cook the eggs in the morning, right? And you just constantly raise the bar, like you said. And unfortunately, I see a lot of parents that work a lot, and then when they come home, they just let their kids either play computer games all day or stay on their tablets and their phones. And that's a problem over there. And if parents want a solution to this, they need to participate in their own rescue as well. They need to be accountable for the things that is in their control, and they need to hold people accountable for the things that are not in their control. So parents need to do their due diligence when it comes to their kids and discipline them, as in teach them a skill, teach them discipline, teach them how to clean their room routinely. That's the kind of discipline I'm talking about. And also hold the school boards and people in power who are bringing this material, hold them responsible and accountable for the things that they're teaching the kids. Because if you have to go to work to provide for your family and somebody needs to watch your kids, these are the people that you elected, and the people in leadership need to be held accountable to ensure that the teachers are teaching the right material and not sexualizing the kids. And I'm seeing this as a big problem. Well, Jon, once again, thank you so much. I feel like I've learned a ton just listening from you, and I hope our viewers and listeners also feel the same way. If you are feeling a little bit discomforted by the information, I think that's a good thing. You know, it's time to light that fire underneath you and to make sure that you do something about it, that you are not so naive when it comes to the kids and when it comes to the education and the things that are happening. And if you see other parents too taking their kids to drag, just, you know, if you have an influence, just tell them to not do that and, you know, protect yourself. Jon, thank you once again for coming on this podcast. I'm going to be linking all the websites that you've mentioned, so people can find you online. And I really appreciate all your insight that you've given us into what's happening and the trends. And yeah, I can't thank you enough for this. And for everybody listening, I encourage you to have a look at the other podcasts where I discuss the policies, procedures, and practices that school boards have. You can also see my delegation from the school board. You could see the books as well that are in the schools. I have links below all the videos. All right, everybody. Until next time, take care.